press office in North End, Tacoma. And she specializes in 100-year-old technology. So she's here to teach us.
So I'm starting out my little talk with this, have you guys heard this before, mind your P's and Q's? No?
Yeah.
So some people say it's mind your pints and quarts, but I don't think that's what it means. It's printers, we have to set everything backwards. So P's look like Q's and Q's look like P's. So that's where that term comes from. And there's some images of typesetters, and that's what I do. I work with tiny pieces of lead, and it's super challenging and frustrating, but also delightful. And I'm going to do my presentation in alphabetical order, so help me out if I go astray, let me know. I make artist books, and what those are, this is a definition, but I would give you a really quick definition. Typically, I would write my own text or use found text and create some sort of structure to hold that text to enhance the experience for the reader. So it might be engaging multiple senses, using materials that are tactile and interesting, using scent, using touch, using sound if possible. So I'm going to show you some examples of my work. On the right are some fly swatters, actually. So I'd like to incorporate text in unusual ways. This is a book that was actually inspired by Tom Glenn, one of your members. He has beehives, you guys know that. And one of his bees, they come and eat at my house all the time. Tom gives me honey, so that seems like a fair deal. But I was inspired by this bee that stung me in the foot. And so I gathered all these specimens of bees from my studio and created a book that's in a hive shape. And I brought it on the back table there if you want to take a look at it. But I blame Tom for this book. That's my cat, who's super helpful when I'm working. This is a series of blocks that are reminiscent of alphabet blocks. And this shows some of the process for printing and then the assembly that takes a long time to create something like this. I also brought these, they're in the back. But it's a set of alphabet blocks made of paper, and you can create patterns or structures with those. So part of the enjoyment for me is having the experience of the reader be able to touch the work and interact with it in a way that you might not with a codex or a regular book. Chandler O'Leary, I guess, spoke to you guys a month or two ago. We often work together, and this is a series that we actually came and talked to you about maybe 4 years ago, an ongoing series. So she's the illustrator, and I'm the printer, and the series has been going on since, I think, 2008. So I often work with other artists as part of my process, which I really enjoy. And the series is, I think, on our 16th print now. I'm inspired by ephemera, so if any of you guys have squirreled away awesome, intriguing ephemera, don't throw it out, pass it on to me. These are some images that I collect, and it also inspires my work. On the bottom left, I'm on the studio tours every year, so I'm always trying to come up with something new. So that's a tachometer, and it's also printed on a coaster, and I was number 10 on the tour. So I thought that was actually hilarious. This is a book about, it's called a flexagon, and it has multiple panels, and as you flip through them, it's the story about how rags make paper, paper makes money, so on and so forth, and the paper's made out of shredded currency. And this is the press that I work on in the studio, and it shows actually printing from plastic, so that's a digital, modern technology combined with a very old press. And I work that way sometimes in order to print. The process I use is called letterpress printing. So it's printing from a raised surface, And that could be wood type, metal type, or plastic like this. It gets ink on top of it. I roll the paper on top of it. It creates an impression in that paper, and that's what letterpress printing is. And good old Gutenberg is given credit with beginning that process, or let's say making it super efficient. But I would say that Chinese printers were doing that a lot longer, a lot earlier than Gutenberg. I like to use work that challenges in other ways. This is a series of prints, and I printed about light, and I used glow-in-the-dark ink. And I like to work in challenging ways with setting the type. So the type is on the press, curved around a circle. That's not really what you're supposed to do, but I enjoy figuring out how to do tricky things. And that's handmade paper that it's printed on. This is also a book. It's on exhibit actually at University of Washington. They bought the one copy of the book. Much of my work ends up in special collections at universities around the country. And this horse lives at UW, and he's out on exhibit till June. When I sold it, I agreed that they had to feed and water him regularly. And the book pulls apart. It's a real plastic horse, and then the book, or the text, is on the inside. And the paper is made from handmade paper with horsehair in it, which smells really bad when you're making paper. This is a piece I did for the Tacoma Community Foundation, and I was one of the lucky artists who were awarded a commission, and they pick an artist every year. And I think this was about 3 years ago. And the piece I did was talking about community and comparing community to trees, and sort of a lot of the common language about limbs and roots and that foundation that's really important to keep community together. When I moved here, I was impressed with the trees and how important they are. When we went on a baseball trip with my son to the middle of the state, and all of a sudden the trees were gone, and I was shocked. I hadn't been there before, and it sort of impressed me how important they are to Tacoma. So this is printed on paper I made from great red cedar, and printed this pattern, and I'll show you the finished book in a couple slides. Actually, here it is. I found on Antique Row this awesome, I guess it's called like a salesman's sales kit. They're selling shingles, and the panels swing around, as you can see there. And I took the advertising panels and replaced my own text and talked about community and trees and the importance that they play together. So the paper is handmade with the red cedar that I described, and they now have it at the Community Foundation. This is about the Cabinet of Curiosities. So this is a book I made. I interviewed 15 collectors and asked them to give one object from their collection. So this guy collected huge beetles. He actually gave me one. I had to go to his house and interview him about his beetle collection. He had a sort of mysterious accent. It made it all very creepy but awesome. And he delivered the beetle and showed me his other specimens. And so I made a box for each collector and talked about the collection habits. Obviously, I collect type and presses, and so I understood these people and wanted to talk about them and the obsession to collect. So here's my definition of letterpress, and this is a type case, and you can see on the right-hand side are where all the capital letters are. The left-hand side are the lowercase letters. Originally, there were separate cases, and at the upper level would be uppercase, and the lower level was a separate case with the lowercase type. And some smart guy or gal, maybe, or a gal who told a guy. That's how it works usually, right? Hopefully it's changing. But whomever was responsible for this, they named this invention the California case. So it's the gold rush. We want to get printers out there to serve all these needs for the gold rush. And let's put all the type together in one case. And we're going to call it the California case. So that's the story behind that. And also a definition of letterpress printing, which is, again, what I do. This is a book. We're on M now, if you guys are following along alphabetically. This is The Girl in the Moon, and it's another one that glows in the dark. I worked with an illustrator, children's book illustrator, and this shows the progression of the moon and all the crazy things that happen at night. Babies are born, slugs come out, and the text on the back talks about all these things that happen. This shows some of the other tricky things I do on press. This type is locked up in a circle with a bunch of magnets around electrical tape and plumber's clamps.
Yeah.
I can assure you this is not how typesetting is normally done, but it totally works. And this was a print I did about spring tomatoes and all the names of the heirloom tomatoes, which I think are fascinating, super fantastic, and mortgage lifter. Ornaments are little goodies that printers can incorporate in their work. It's kind of like clip art on the computer, and I have a huge collection, I call it my jewelry collection, of tiny ornaments, and they're printed on the inside of these little paper houses. And the text they're haikus about homelessness. So you're engaged in these cute little paper houses, and then you read the text, and it kind of kicks you in the belly, which is what I like to do with my work. These are some images. I showed you the piece for the Tacoma Community Foundation earlier. This is making paper in my yard. I had to go to a mill. I got a huge piece of that top left image, a huge piece of the bark. You peel off the inner bark. I cooked it on my barbecue for about 5 hours. It has the little side burner, and it's a good thing because it smells really bad. And it cooks and cooks and cooks, and then I'm able to form a sheet of paper out of it. And this is the paper printed on the left-hand side. The title of the book was engraved. Here's some more crazy typesetting. This is setting type in a curve, but this is actually the proper way to do it. There's not many of these circular quads around anymore, and so I've really made an effort to teach younger printers how to use this equipment correctly or not throw it away if they have it. So that's kind of been a mission of mine to save that practice. Will Ransom was a printer from Snohomish, Washington, who inspired me. He was called the man from Snohomish. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. And at, I think, 18 years old, he moved to Chicago to study at the Art Institute. And he's always been an inspiration. So this is some of his type that he designed. It was used in Charlie Chaplin movies as the titling. And I think it's super beautiful. And he's always been an inspiration for me. Here's some pictures from my studio in Tacoma. It's a garage, but it's an awesome garage, and there's a lot of heavy metal in there. And we moved out here. My husband got a job, and part of the deal was we would get moved. And he said, well, my wife is an artist, and she's got a little studio. Could we move that too? And the company's like, yeah, no problem. I think they thought like I was a watercolor painter or something. So many pounds of equipment later, all this stuff came from Chicago, and it's here, and I continue to print. Super thankful that I have this shop. This is a little film that takes place at the Elliott Press, where I teach at PLU.
When we were younger, we thought everyone was on our side. Then we grew a little and romanticized the time I saw flowers in your hair. 'Cause it takes a boy to live, it takes a man to pretend he was there. So then we grew a little and knew a lot, and now we demonstrated it to the cops and all the things we said. We were self-assured. 'Cause it's a long road to wisdom, but it's a short one being ignored. Be in my eyes, be in my heart, be in my eyes, be in my heart. So now I think that I love you back, and I hope it's not too late, 'cause you're so attractive and the way you move. I won't close my eyes. 'Cause it takes a man, it takes a woman to make him compromise. So be in my eyes, be in my heart, be in my eyes, be in my heart.
It's a Chandler and Price press.
Pardon?
I think, I just heard somebody say it's a Kluge, it's a Chandler and Price. I wish we had a Kluge.
It just so happens that I was in the paper business for 40 years, and I used to call on all the printers, and all this equipment that you're showing brings back memories.
That's great.
And one of the places in Tacoma was called ABC Printers. I think it was owned by Bobby Curtis,
Uh-huh.
and he had a lot of the old type. And there's one in Tacoma now that's still in business, is Johnson Cox.
Right.
And they would have some old letter presses, and they used to have a gentleman that could repair old books that came from Olympia, state printer.
Yeah.
There's not very many of those old timers left anymore.
No. No, and the way that I've gotten a lot of equipment over the years is to show up, and typically the printer's widow is there, and they see a young-ish gal show up, and they're really happy to have their equipment move on, not to a guy. No offense. Sorry about the movie, but it's on YouTube if you guys want to see it at actual proper speed. But that's one of my students at the Elliott Press at PLU. I've been teaching there for 10 years. And the students learn how to set type from scratch. And compared to most of what they do in the rest of their lives, it's pretty awesome. They really have to slow down. They want to kill me sometimes, but some of them really love it. And then I'm a little sad to say there's not always jobs out there for them to do. That being said, one of my students works full-time as a printer. There's a few jobs out there, so that cheers me up. Part of what I do is work with other artists, and this is a piece for a bookbinder, Don Gleister, and he came to me and said, I've got this book, all the pages are metal, sheet metal, can you do something? So I ended up printing the text on sheet metal, which was challenging and awesome. This is actually why I'm here. The Ways Goose is going to be at King's Books on Sunday, April 27th. I've left some bookmarks for you guys on the back table if you want to grab those so you know when the date is. We print with a steamroller. It's awesome. And the prints are 3 feet by 3 feet. It is pandemonium and delight. There's lots of letterpress printers there and lots of hands-on activities. So kids, grandkids, it's a great opportunity. This is a lot of the current printing that we see out there. Plastic plates, slammed to do that. This is a piece printed on 17 magazine. It's a magazine for girls, 16-year-old girls, and so that's the text in Braille. And I thought it was pretty ironic. I'm wondering what the text says, but I enjoyed the challenge of printing on top of the Braille paper. This is another artist I work with, Suzanne Moore, and this is a book of hers about the letters, the number 0, and its importance in history. That's my son, Jack. We're not in alphabetical order, are we? In the lay of the printer's case, J and U come at the end because they were added to the alphabet later. Jack goes to Stadium High School, go Tigers. He's a pitcher, and that's my dog, Brown. He's a handsome hunk of man dog. And I didn't have a lot of J's, so that's why they're there. And then this is a book I did with some glass negatives I found in the attic of my home in Tacoma. It resides in many, many collections around the country, which is really cool. Tacoma is out there. Some of the images are from Tacoma in the 1890s. So it's at UW, it's at UPS, it's at Brigham Young, it's in the British Library. So we have a little bit of Tacoma out there in the world. Thank you very much, especially Kathleen, for inviting me. And if there's questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I have a question many artists don't include in their presentation. If somebody wants you to commission you to do a piece, or if they'd like to purchase one of your pieces, where do they go?
I brought stickers back there. Watch Tacoma Grow, which is what we printed last year at the studio tour, and you can grab one of those. I have a website, springtidepress.com, and that's a great way to get a hold of me.
Jessica, is there a place where we can come and see some of your work? It sounds like it's kind of spread out, not in a gallery where we can, or in your studio.
Yeah, I love hosting visitors or school groups in the studio. My website shows a lot of my work. There's going to be a big printmaking show here at the museum this summer, and I'll be hopefully part of that. And yeah, it's hard. You have to go to libraries, which a lot of people don't know that's a great place to see work, and it's not in galleries so often. But I also will have a show coming up this fall in the old post office museum, the Postal Museum, where they exhibited stamps, I guess. And so that'll all be about ephemera, and that'll be starting in September. And it'll be up, I think, for 3 or 4 months.
The students that come in your class, what are they looking at a career in this, or is it?
We have a really cool minor at PLU that's called Publishing and Printing Arts that's been around for 30 years. So these students would get a minor, and most of their coursework is technical publishing, but then they have to take my class, which is called Art of the Book, and they learn some binding and letterpress printing as a foundation and a hands-on historic approach to the craft that they want to take on. So an example is one of my students is working at the Broadway Center, running a lot of the public outreach, but her experience, she has an awareness of graphic design and writing, so all those skills come together in a really cool way. Yeah.
How did you learn?
Oh, that's a really long story, but in college I was a typesetter, and it was not this technology, it was the technology that followed. You typeset on this huge, huge console with these ridiculous film strips, and that sort of parlayed into, I just moved from there backwards in technology is the answer to that. But my background was actually an English major, so it's a great combination of graphic design and writing put together.
Questions?
Yeah.
Hopefully you forgive Tom. But you mentioned at the very beginning they're made of lead. This,
Yeah, actually, type metals, lead, tin, and antimony.
okay, so do you have to do any special, you have to be careful dealing with lead, or is it enough of an alloy that you don't have to worry about that?
I do get my blood tested regularly, and I guess my levels are okay. I am a little, addled. That might be solvents or lead. But I seem to manage. The problem was typesetters would, it's called a sort, and they'd stick it in their mouth because you've got your hands busy, and that's a good place to hold something. And that's how you get lead poisoning. So I try not to lick my type.
Any others? Oh, you are raising your hand. Oh, no, you're not.